Broadcasting from New York City to the world, it's the G-Man Interviews.
At the heart of every major construction job are the master builders and skilled craftsmen who turn dreams into reality. Morgan State University's Department of Communication Studies is undergoing a major change. We're tearing down walls and rafters to build a bigger and better place for students to pursue a career in journalism and mass communication. The master builders and skilled craftsmen of this job are the members of our faculty. The outstanding job they do in the classroom is a major building block of the changes we're undergoing. From a Pulitzer Prize winner to a Fulbright scholar, we have a dynamic, multiracial, multicultural, multinational faculty that makes our department a good place to learn and makes the School of Global Journalism and Communication we are building an exciting construction project. And that's why we say, the good thing we have here at Morgan is about to get a lot better.
Welcome. Joining me to discuss the program that was just showcased is DeWayne Wickham, Dean of Morgan State University's School of Global Journalism and Communication. Dean Wickham began his journalism career back in 1973 during the Watergate scandal that forced the resignation of President Richard Nixon. That introduction to the rough and tumble interplay between journalism and American politics has shaped his career. In nearly 4 decades as a journalist, Wickham has reported on 8 U.S. presidents, dined with Fidel Castro in Havana, accompanied Jean Bertrand Aristide on his return to Haiti from exile, traveled with Nelson Mandela on his 8-city tour of the United States following his release from a South Africa prison, and followed then presidential candidate Barack Obama to Paris for his historic campaign trip to the French capital. During his journalism career, Wickham has worked for U.S. News and World Report, The Baltimore Sun, WBAL-TV, CBS News, BET, and USA Today, where he has written a syndicated column since 1985. The author of 4 books, Wickham is a founding member and former president of the National Association of Black Journalists. Prior to coming to Morgan State University, he was scholar in residence and distinguished professor of journalism at Delaware State University, distinguished visiting professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and distinguished professor of journalism and chair of the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at North Carolina A&T State University. Welcome to the show, Dean Wickham.
Hey, Gary, it's good to be with you.
According to the school's webpage, the mission of Morgan State University's School of Global Journalism and Communications is to give voice to a broader group of people who struggle to contribute to the public discourse that shapes this nation and the world. We serve this cause with innovative teaching, cutting-edge research, and exemplary service to Maryland, our nation, and the world. Could you elaborate on this?
Yeah. Hey, listen, that sounded pretty good, didn't it?
It sounded great.
It's kind of that academic conversation that one has to have. What we are in essence saying is that we want to give our people an opportunity to speak for themselves. It's always been a proposition, I think, that one would acknowledge, although maybe not so much in the mainstream media, that we do best as a nation when we give voice to all corners of our society. And for the longest time, particularly African Americans, did not contribute in a significant way to the conversations that took place about issues that have to do with finance, that issues that have to do with governance, that issues that have to do with politics. We were not consulted. And you could go to, and still can go, certainly to some of our top black universities and find really sharp minds, but they're not being tapped by mainstream media. And so, one, we want to train our journalists to understand that we live in a global village, that in this global village, the majority of the population across the globe is comprised of people of color. We want them to understand that within that community of people of color, there are some great intellects, and that we ought to take advantage of their presence and to afford them an opportunity, as well as others, to comment on the important issues that shape our lives and that shape this world.
If you decided to hang a portrait of a journalist in your office, past or present, as a symbol of what your school represents and strives to achieve, whom would you choose and why?
Ida B. Wells, a tough newspaper publisher at a time when it was very hard to be black and tough as a male, really difficult to be black and tough as a female. The story, as it's told, says that she carried in her smock 2 pistols. She went about her business of doing journalism out in the Midwest of America and challenged the conventional wisdom, as degrading as it was, about black men in that time. And so she was tough, and she was as tough as they come. And I just greatly admire the history of her journalism and her activism on behalf of African Americans.
Thus far, what has proved to be the most challenging aspect of your position as dean?
Legacy. You know, even when you get to create something new, it's not really new. Our new school, our School of Global Journalism and Communication, really has been spawned out of what was then the Department of Communication Studies here at Morgan State University. It was a very good department. It was good at teaching 20th century journalism. But we needed a school that would take us into the 21st century, one that would recognize that legacy media, newspapers, magazines, television as we know it, Walter Cronkite, and that's the way it is, that kind of news content is being changed by technology. How we deliver content is being changed, but it's also shaping what that content is. And to the extent that we don't keep pace in the academy, then we don't produce young people who go off into the world who can do that kind of journalism, and then we stifle our voices. And so the people who were here when I arrived, very bright people, very accomplished people, but I think in some ways were more than just a bit reluctant to see the vision. After a year and a half nearly of effort, most of them are on board, and now have demonstrated a great commitment to what we're doing, but it's still touch and go with a few faculty members who are not yet convinced that we're moving in the right direction.
In April of 2012, Roger Ailes, chairman and CEO of Fox News, addressed 350 students, which included journalism students, at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Ailes basically told the journalism students to consider changing their major if they were going into journalism because they cared. If you were debating Ailes, how would you respond?
Journalists, more than any others in our country and in much of the world, shape the direction of things yet to be, influence government, influence the behavior of people within societies in ways that are often very subtle, but certainly very impactful. I think Ailes really knows that. I think Roger Ailes went to a journalism school that is largely thought to be left of center in terms of the kind of students they have there at the university, and tried to wave them off. And I think in doing so, he would have, had he succeeded, and he didn't, he would have done the craft and the nation a great disservice. We need dynamic young people into this craft. Everything people know, I tell people this all the time, you think about this, everything you know, and everything your friends know, everything your parents and your relatives know, almost everything, they learn from media. Who do we vote for? Where do we live? To what schools do we send our children? Where do we bank? What neighborhoods are off limits to us? There are a lot of questions that are answered by information we get from media. We cannot be everywhere. In fact, we're not most places, but we make these life-altering determinations based upon the flow of information that comes to us. And it comes to us largely by journalists and other information mass communication providers. So I think he's wrong. And I think he probably knows he's wrong, too. And I think he's trying to, to cut this thing out for one segment of our society. We need all voices. And I am unabashed in saying that I'm a liberal. I'm not a progressive, I'm a liberal. I think progressives are liberals who are afraid to say so. And who have been kowtowed by conservatives into re-identifying themselves out of the hope that they may not be actually noticed for their liberalism. I'm a liberal. Ailes is a conservative. And what Ailes is doing, I think, is trying to, send liberals stumbling down the rabbit hole away from the fight. What I do at this university and what I hope that we succeed in doing is to prepare young people to be heavily armed intellectually for the kind of journalistic engagement that if they get into the profession, they will realize they will have to undertake. It's no small challenge.
I'm glad that you ended on the point that you did because it's a great segue into the next question. Bill McCreary, Les Payne, and the late Gil Noble are among many legendary journalists of color who earned numerous awards throughout their careers, but, with all due respect, they never obtained the same level of national visibility as their white colleagues Tom Brokaw, Mike Wallace, Ted Koppel, or Peter Jennings.
Yeah.
McCreary, Payne, and Noble are household names, but the majority of those households are black.
Yeah.
Moreover, to date, aside from Max Robinson, no black has hosted a nightly news program on a major network. And prior to Gwen Ifill and Judy Woodruff being named co-anchors and managing editors of PBS's NewsHour, attempts to place Connie Chung, Katie Couric, and Christiana Ampor into key anchor positions proved disastrous for the networks and ratings. Given these facts, is the school doing anything to make students understand that racism and sexism may impact their careers on some level?
Absolutely. Listen, we have an ongoing conversation about race and sexism in our society. But more importantly, I urge my faculty to have a conversation with students about how we get to control a piece of the media. We can complain about the media's reluctance to embrace the best and the brightest of us, but our efforts might be better spent looking at what lies ahead. In the past, if you wanted to control a big chunk of media, you had to have a big wad of money that would allow you to buy printing presses and paper and ink, or buy trucks to deliver newspapers and to have this huge operation. Today, you can produce content online with relatively little effort and distribute that to a much wider audience than the New York Times could ever imagine, than USA Today could ever contemplate. And so we need to have a conversation with young people today, not only about how you write a story, how you produce a story for broadcast, but how you own your own media, your own delivery system. The key to our having the widest possible voice today is our ability to imagine and to realize our ownership of media in this country. We can do it today. The technology permits it. If you think about that first black newspaper, what did they say? We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. That was some pretty heady stuff back in 1827. And they struggled, and they didn't last very long because they ran smack dab into that big wall of we need big money, printing presses, paper, ink, distribution systems, and the like. And today, if you own a computer, you have a printing press. If you own a computer and you have an internet account, you have a distribution system. And one of the things I tell my students, I urge them to imagine themselves as owner-operators. The greatest hurdle between blacks and financial success is a steady job. We all want a job with benefits, and usually, if you have a job with benefits that you didn't create, you're working for somebody else. And you limit your opportunities in the most severest kind of way.
Let me present you with a scenario. It's graduation day, and one of your students approaches you and states the following. Dean Wickham, I'm confused. scared, and really need your advice. Should I apply for reporter positions in alternative or corporate-owned media? What would you say to the student?
I tell them to follow their heart and their mind. What brought you into this university? What motivated you to pursue a career in some aspect of journalism? If it was to give voice to issues, if it was to shape the culture in which we live, then you have to follow that path. And you have to determine which way that path will take you. Sometimes it will take you into mainstream media, or sometimes it will take you into alternative media. You got to figure out which most quickly take you to that point where you want to be. I would hope, by the way, that my students would not arrive at that point so late in their matriculation. Because I'm talking about this all the time. I don't want students, frankly, who want a job just because they want to write. I want students who understand the power of the press. I want students who understand the power of the fourth estate. And I want students who are chomping at the bit to get into this game and to wield the kind of power that other folks in this country have wielded since the first ship docked on these shores. This is the really important stuff. I can't overstate it. You really can't overstate. Ever since the first caveman crawled out of a cave and found himself a big old stone and started chipping away with some symbols to pass along to someone else, people have had an unquenchable thirst for news and information. And even as we have some people today saying, oh, journalism is dead, newspapers are dying, the only thing that's happening in our profession is a change in delivery systems. The desire for news runs unabated. People can't get enough of it. They may think, I don't watch the news. Yeah, but they want news. They may not watch it in the format in which it's given, but everybody wants to be in the know. Everyone wants to understand what's going on. People need information. They thirst for it, which is why, particularly among people of color in this country, African Americans, higher percentage of African Americans than any other group, own smartphones. Hispanics second, whites third. African Americans number one is the percentage of the group who own tablets. Don't tell me we don't want information and news. We may not like the way it's packaged, but we want that information and we want that news. And we've got to figure out how to package content in a way that we can get it to people where they are, on their smartphones, on their tablets, and those new devices that are coming along.
And finally, complete this sentence. When I retire from this position and the world of journalism, I hope
to play as much golf as often in as many places as I can around this world. At some point we have to learn to let go. At some point we have to determine that we've done as much as we can to bring the next generation along. And it's really easy to let go if you've been giving back all the time. It's hard to let go if you've held on to things so tightly that nobody else has had a chance to get a piece of the action. My job as a dean is to ensure that young people can come into this craft and realize their abilities as members of the talented 10th that Du Bois used to talk about. And if we do that job well, I'm on the golf course if you need me.
Well said. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, Dean Wickham, and I wish you and the students the very best going forward.
Gary, good talking to you, and congratulations on a wonderful program.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. If you ever need me, you know where to find me. As always, I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me. If you would like to make a donation in support of independent journalism, freedom of speech, and the work presented on this channel, you may do so by clicking on the Donations Accepted Here link posted on the channel's About page. Until next time, stay cool, stay safe, and stay informed.